Didn't hear we were coming,
That's lobby. Lobby for lobby gobblers. Here.
Well, today we're in Burnley, and I'd like to introduce you to a bit of a theory I've got regarding what is probably one of the oldest recorded properly mining sites in Burnley, which we can take back to the 1400s and certainly to 1550. And it's the old Broadhead Moor Colliery and its exact location, and that's a little bit of a theory I'm trying to put forward in this video. So where exactly are we? Well, we're on Rosendale Road. There's Crown Point with your singing ringing tree. Crown Point Road there, and Burnley Road or Manchester Road, wherever you come from, going up into Cloudbridge, and Rosendale Road coming down towards Rose Grove. And it's this area here. There's a lay-by. There's the Plane Tree Inn, and this lay-by used to have a butty van, a bait van there, and now they've built some new houses, and this area down here is bared off for new houses also. And then we've got the industrial estate, which is right above Burnley Cemetery, so that's where we are. And the crop edge of the Arley mine runs along this field here, down into this clough, Haberghham Clough, which is where the eminent Dr. Whitaker used to reckon that the Battle of Brunanburh had been fought, but we know that's not the case. But it is the location of the old Haberghham Hall, and I'm going to put forward in the video why I think that this could be the old Broadhead Moor Colliery, and how it kind of, well, it evolved to become the Barclay Hills Colliery as well. And this is where Barclay Hills Colliery used to be. There were a ginny road ran up from Apton Valley Colliery, across the road there, over a bridge, and onto this site where there was a massive court works on the colliery, and then another ginny road ran down to the canal, Smallshire Colliery, and the railway. So it's a big area, and I think it's quite an exciting subject, so I hope you enjoy it. I am fascinated by the old Broadhead Moor Colliery, and I've been struggling really to get other people to show a bit more interest in it. Yeah, it's a long time ago. It was 500, nearly 600 years ago now, and even going back further to the 1400s and possibly even the 1300s, but I'm fascinated by that. I really am. It's part of our mining heritage, and you think of how it all started. I'm not saying mining started here, but we've got a focal point. So where was the Broadhead Moor Colliery? Well, Broadhead Moor in the old days stretched right down from, I believe, because I'm not an expert, Crown Point down towards where the cemetery is. Broadhead Moor Farm is up there on Crown Point Road. Now, if we were going back a long, long way, centuries ago, the area wasn't, I don't mean it wasn't as big, but there wasn't as many places, if you know what I mean. So Broadhead Moor would encompass a far larger area. So where would the pit be? Well, obviously it would be where the coal was. That's a no-brainer. What coal would they be after? Well, the Arley mine crops out here, just further up. And that's why I think this is favourite for being the Broadhead Moor Colliery. Yeah, we could go further up Crown Point and get to the horse pasture. I think the horse pasture coals are up there. But surely if they knew the crop edge of the Arley was here, and I can't see why they wouldn't know, because of the old tracks and the rivers that go through and the exposure, they will go for this first. It's near, I would love to see an ancient map of the tithe, an ancient tithe map showing where the tracks are and its transport links, but I believe from the evidence that we've got that this is a favourite, certainly, of where the old Broadhead Moor Colliery was, dating back. I'll try and go through the bit of history that we have on it. Obviously it dates back, the story is two smiths in the I think it's the 1450s, maybe a bit further on, I'll check it up, from down Hapton way, that were looking for iron ore. Now, why were they looking for iron ore? They were looking for iron ore because they knew there was iron ore present. They actually worked the iron ore back in those days. Even George Hayes in his history talks about them working iron before working coal. And they discovered the coal through the iron. possibility, but they did work the small deposits of iron that there were in Burnley and Rosendale. It was worked as a cottage industry. So the two smiths came looking for iron. Now we know certainly at Ruddle Scout, the iron is near the Arley mine. Is it just below or just above? I always get mixed up. But iron working on Ruddle Scout there in Thieveley goes way back into the 1400s as well. The mine is actually still there, although it seems to have disappeared recently. You can't find it the same. Well, that was there. Well, the Arley mine's here, so would it not be feasible to look for iron where there was coal, and they were looking in the same spot? So that's another thing that points towards it. And then we have Townley coming, and the battle that kind of went on between him, Hugh Habergham and Shuttleworths, because the local people had the rights to work the coal for their own use, and Townley came along, didn't it, and got a lease off the king to actually work it on a commercial basis. And if you look at this area on LiDAR, it is literally full of shafts. So I think there's a good case to say this is where the pit was. Whether anybody else is interested or not, by the by, I am, and I think it's important to the history of coal mining in this area. So this is a shaft here in this field. I'm not saying this is part of the old pit. It obviously evolved, didn't it? So the Dandy and the Arley crop out in this field. Dickinson certainly shows it on his plan, and it's on the geological map, but it's kind of evolved over the years. Obviously, well, my take on it is that first of all it was the Broadhead Moor Colliery, and we've got even things going back to the 1600s and the leases for Broadhead Moor. Now under the geological books like Hull's book and Wild, they call the Arley the Haberghham coal. Well, this is Habergham Eaves, so does it get its name from this area? The Arley crops out here as far as the Deerpley Fault, where it's cut off, runs across Heeley Heights, and there's not much record of working under Heeley Heights neither, not till you get the other side and Burnley Drift kind of comes up there under low Timber Hill and what have you, getting the Arley and taking it down into Burnley Centre. But this area, further down to the dip, because this dips quite dramatically, Apton Valley dipped about 1 in 6 down here. Basically, if you worked at the valley, we're looking down the north developments, or this is where the north developments were further down, same angle of dip, with the Arley and the Dandy being 900 feet above the Apton Valley workings. Now it became Haberghham Colliery, or Barclay Hills. The shafts at Cherryfold for a start, Old Habergham, as Dickinson marks on his plan, and then the Barclay Hills Colliery. Now through research with the Coal Authority, I found the plans of Barclay Hills or Habergham Colliery on the other side of what we now know as Rosendale Road, on the freehold lands. But I haven't managed to find the copyhold plans on this side, which may show where the workings buttressed up against the really old workings. So Barclay Hills was quite a big pit when you look at it underground. It worked down as far as the canal. Then below that, the Smallshire pit was then sunk, working the Arley mine even further down to the dip, and then Ganna was sunk. Again, the same patch of coal which starts up here, down at Ganna, and then Ganna worked down towards the new Habergham, which Cheapside, down in near Padiham itself. So this is a continuous patch of coal that runs right from the crop here, right down past Barclay Hills. Smallshire worked it, Ganna worked it, right down into Habergham, where it comes up then from the bottom of the Burnley Basin and goes up towards Fence. That is the area of take, all one continuous lot. And that's where Apton Valley was going to be, but underneath in the Union mine. Well, here we are again with our trusty maps from the Library of Scotland, National Library of Scotland. And this is great because this is the British Geological Survey. Sadly, it's only the 1 inch, but it's on top of Google Earth. And we're right at the right place where we should be. We're at the top of Habergham, looking where that outcrop is. Now, this is the patch of coal that we're interested in. This is what I think the Broadhead Moor Colliery was working from the Deerpley Fault right across towards Ely Heights. Let's just open it up and you can see exactly where it is. There we are. That's Rosendale Road. Manchester Road, or seeing as I'm from Crowshire Booth, that's Burnley Road. And then we're going across Rosendale Road there and into the Rosehill Estate. So this is the area, I'm convinced, is what the Broadhead Moor Colliery was working. And perhaps the most early workings could be down in the clough. That's where they were reputedly, the two smiths were looking for iron ore. And it's interesting to see where it runs again. We come across top of Healy Heights. You got this big fault running in. There's the early mine again, which has it running through the Rose Hill estate. I don't know if Burnley Bill's still there, but don't go start digging the garden up, Brian. It's all gone. But it's great because we can see exactly what it is. I have been told on great authority that it might be just a little bit out, because I know a guy that's actually drilled for the coal there. So anyway, that's exactly where I think we're looking for the Broadhead Moor Colliery. As you see, there's the isolation hospital. We're just looking at the horse pasture coals up there, and I don't think they're going for them at all. That's where a bulk of the shafts were, behind us, where the building site is. I say the bulk of them. Those near the outcrop, and they're only about 36 foot deep, thereabouts 9 yard deep. So they were very near the crop edge, and I'm wondering how far on where I am now is the crop edge as well. When you look on LiDAR, they're plain as day. So like again, that's my case for the fact that this is the old Broadhead Moor Colliery. I can't prove it, but somebody's got to make a decision and put some thesis or hypothesis forward, haven't they? So we're looking on LiDAR now, and it isn't as good as the last time I used LiDAR, but I hope you can see this. Now, you would have to be somebody a lot less than Lieutenant Columbo to not see all these shafts in this field. Where are we now? We're next, that's the lay-by on Rosendale Road where the bait van sort of parks up, and they've got the new estate coming in here. And these, can you see, all these old shafts here going right down towards Haberghham Clough. And you can see all sorts of other things as well, old ploughed fields, all going all the way down to Haberghham Clough and into the industrial estate. Plain as day. There's been an awful lot of mining activity down here, and that's the point. So if this isn't the old Broadhead Moor Colliery, right, what is it? It is something quite significant, and it evolved into the Haberghham Colliery without doubt, because this is the crop edge of the early mine that goes right down under Smallshire, right down under Lower House, and then up the other side of the Burnley Basin up towards Fence. It's a continuous patch of coal with bits of faults here and there as well, but it's continuous. So you can see the level of mining activity there's been here, and again, that is a big tick for this as well, for my theory that this is as good a place as any for the old Broadhead Moor Colliery. talking specifically really about the area that's actually around Haberghham Hall and Haberghham Clough up towards Rosendale Road, the top of Sepp Clough really, rather than Habergham Eaves itself, which was a massive place. And the manor itself, it looks like, was given by Roger de Lacy to a guy who took on its name of Uda Habergham. So again, it went to the Normans, some of Duke Bill's descendants' mates, didn't it? I mean, obviously it's got quite an interesting prehistory as well, didn't it, before that, because there used to be the tale that the Battle of Brunanburgh was sort of fought round that neck of the woods, wasn't there? The eminent Dr. Whitaker, he propounded that particular view, and the fact that the Broadclough dikes might have also been something to do with that. Well, that's kind of been debunked now, isn't it? I think nearly everywhere in the north of England has claimed that the Battle of Brunanburgh was there, and for those who don't know that, it's all to do with the Vikings, a big massive battle that there was there before the Normans ever even invaded. But anyway, we're on about the pit, aren't we? So if we go back, I think it's 1526. Now it looks as though the tenants had the rights to dig for their own coal. And this is a common thing on certain lands. If you look on the first Ordnance Survey maps, you see dotted around everywhere, coal pit, old coal pit. And away from where we know that there's established 17th and 18th, 19th century collieries. And they could be to do with that particular right. So the tenants round about Habergham Hall, Habergham Eaves there, they had the right to dig their own coal, but for their own personal use. Now then, it looks like things changed a little bit. In 1526, Charles Townley, well, he got a lease off the Crown to say that he could actually work the colliery as on a commercial basis, rather than the people that was just digging for their own particular use. But this caused problems because the people didn't want to lose the rights to the coal that were working, and it also annoyed two other yeomen, the Haberghams and the Shuttleworths. Very famous names today, aren't they? Shuttleworths now of Garthorpe Hall, or were of Garthorpe Hall, and the Haberghams of Habergham Hall there. So reading between the lines, it looks as though Habergham and Shuttleworth, they'd gone and caused a commotion down in Burnley itself, with the townspeople up, to the point that they came mob-handed to smash up Townley's pit to make sure that he couldn't work it again. And the whole thing went to court. There was a big inquest on it, but it's good to kind of imagine the sort of riot, well, yeah, the riot that kind of ensued. The inward politics of it. Really, three prominent members, three prominent families fighting for a little bit of who's going to be top dog with the minerals on one thing and another. Anyway, the pit was wrecked, and Townley couldn't get back in again at the foreseeable. In fact, one of the people that was interviewed, good as me, was on oath, wasn't it? He basically said the only way that this lease can be operated is by the sword, because we're hanging on to our rights. And he also admitted that not only did they sort of get coal for themselves, but they were obviously selling it down in Burnley. But it looks as though, certainly to some extent, Townley must have won the case, and it was settled in his favour, because the people that had been working the coal, well, they were charged 4 pennies for every fother that they'd worked. Now it all goes kind of quiet then until we find another leasee of the colliery. In 1577, a John Braddle, well, he had the lease on the pit, but 2 years later somebody else, but they were 1.5 miles away from him, they started working coal as well. Was it Rappock Lane or something? I think that was mentioned in the lease. So we've got, there's documented evidence there of the Broadhead Moor Colliery being worked as a commercial pit since the 1520s. So can you see the history value that it has? And also the argy-bargy that was caused. I mean, the Townleys made quite a habit of just going and claiming things for themselves. They kind of claimed most of Waller Hill there for themselves, just to keep a leash of greyhounds, as he said, and took all that, enclosed the land and took it off the people. But let's talk a little bit more about this tenants' rights. And when it goes a bit further forward in history, where we can get a good clarification, even just in the 1800s of it. So this about getting free coal then. The tenants had the right, in some cases, to get just coal for their own use. And then when the pits were working, when the Industrial Revolution were in full flow, sometimes the farmers also got free coal because maybe a ginny road came across the land. They had to be compensated because they lost a certain bit of use of the land. And by the way, you've probably noticed that we're not on Rosendale Road anymore, or Habergham Eaves. We're not in Kansas. I've had to move because of the light. So there we go. Now, this practice was still in use, the fact that the tenants were allowed to get coal right up until the 1850s in Burnley. When John Hargreaves obviously there was two different Hargreaves Colliery Company. You had George Hargreaves in Rosendale and you had the exes of John Hargreaves, Colonel John Hargreaves in Burnley. They were both Rosendale companies actually, because John Hargreaves and his family were from Goodshire Fold. Anyway, I'm getting away from this. In the 1850s, the Hargreaves started developing Hapton Valley, and they'd already been working Burnt Hills in Cloudbridge since 1829. But as they were opening up Hapton Valley, there was still a pit above Porter's Gate by the name of Wynn's Pit. I'll show it you on the map here. It's on the first edition Ordnance Survey map. And we know it's definitely this pit because of this particular incident and the fact that Dickinson told us about it. Now, the farmer at Old Barn and New Barn were entitled to coal. But now, it wasn't him that was getting it. The colliery company sent somebody to get it. And it was James Joblin, who was the under-manager at Burnt Hills, who sent three men. Edmund Taylor, Thomas Astin, who was a drawer of 16-year-old, and another drawer. They went up one morning to get coal for Mr. Collins at New Barn. Now, it was, pardon me, it was March, April, and the last time the pit had been worked was just before Christmas time. Now, there was a shaft 14 feet deep, and two drifts into it as well, for ventilation and for drainage. They were working the upper mountain mine. Now, Edmund went down first, and he was let down. They had a windlass at the top. And we're going back to the two blacksmiths from 1450 on Broadhead Moor that were looking for iron when they found coal. One of them started working the coal, and he put up a windlass, so nothing had changed there, had it? Going on for 400 years. Anyway, I'm getting away from this, Anna. Two farm labourers were employed to operate the windlass, and they let Edmund Taylor down in the basket. He got to the bottom and lit a candle. Now, it had always been used with candles. They'd never used safety lamps. Never been a problem in at least 50 years, although one guy said it had been working for going on for 100 years. Now, one of the drawers came down next, and Edmund was making his way in by with his candle, and then Thomas was being let down in the basket by the two farm labourers. And while he was being let down, either at Edmund's candle or at the other drawer's candle, the pit fired, it exploded with such great force as well. The sound was heard a long, long way away. Probably heard it down in Crosher Booth and down in Haberghham Eaves as well. And flames came up out of the shaft. It destroyed the windlass at the top, or knocked it over. The two farm labourers at the top, they scattered. The basket that Thomas was riding down in, that got blown out of the pit, as did two caps that the lads were wearing. They landed 40 yards away. Now, it looks as though young Thomas fell out, as the basket went up, you know, with the force of the explosion. It must have tipped him out, and he fell to the bottom of the shaft. Now, somebody down in Cloudbridge, or nearby anyway, heard and came to the scene to try and help, and they helped get Edmund out of the pit. He immediately tried to get the other lad out because he was worried about the afterdamp, you see. Now, they found young Thomas at the bottom of the pit, and all the back of his head was badly cut, really bad, and he was sort of insensible. And they got him out, and I think Edmund was kind of going a bit insensible by this time. And they managed to get young Thomas into a cart and take him back home down to Rose Hill, but he died sadly. So that's how we know they were still doing these practices up until the 1850s. That was around about 1853. And the reason it probably happened then and hadn't happened previously, the last 50 to 100 years before, was because they were sinking Hapton Valley. At that time, they were modernising Burnt Hills. It had moved up the hill. They were sinking Porter's Gate and a shaft at Cotton Row. But Hapton Valley was being sunk, what we know as the Spar Pit, and it had got to the coal. Now, Joseph Dickinson, when he inspected it, obviously he had to go and find out what caused the explosion. He reckoned it was because they'd sunk the shaft down at the spar, and that had caused a vacuum with Wynn's Pit, if you will, whereas before there wasn't one because the coal down at the spar hadn't been exposed. Now you've got sort of a way in and a way out, even though it was such a long way away. And the gas had actually gone up to the rise through the strata and found its way in the void that was in Wynn's Pit, and that's why it exploded. Just as a point of fact, all that area was worked by Hapton Valley for about 30 years, over 30 years. And because it was very gassy, they sunk many different air shafts to alleviate the gas problem up there. And the area where the Winds Pit was, I don't know if you can still find it today, I need to have a look, but it was opened up as a district of Apton Valley. They put a chain road, the chain road that goes from Spa up to Porter's Gate. There was many different, well, there was 2 or 3 different chain roads off that into drifts all the way up that hill, and they opened up a district called New Winds. So there you are, bit of history there. Oh, thanks to Jack Naden for that, because he mentions it in his book as well, the actual explosion. So I can't help but think that we're really flying over 200 years of history here that we're not really catching up. So let's just have a look on a few things. So we lose the Broadhead Moor Colliery at the end of the 1500s until the 1800s. Now I personally have looked up things on people that have owned mines in Rosendale that came from the Stoops area in the late 1700s that were colliers. So let's see what we can find actually. Obviously we're going to go to Dickinson. So we look, see on Dickinson's map, there's a crop edge of the Arley mine, and there we are going down towards Rosendale Road. And what does Dickinson say? I also want you to understand that the Dandy mine does crop out here as well, and that is very important. Now Dickinson says in the 1860s, Arley or 4 feet has all been got from Haberghham pits, and if you look, he shows all the old coal pits knocking about. Old Haberghham Colliery he shows there, which is at Cherry Fold. That's what we're going to be looking at. And the different old coal pits, 80 yards to 4 foot mine he puts on. Now this also is very, very important. Engine house, that's actually Dickinson's writing, coal pit. And we'll just go and have a look at that actually on the proper Ordnance Survey map, not Dickinson's, but the proper Ordnance Survey map. Let's have a look. That is what he's talking about. That is on, that's what he calls engine house. Now let's have a look at it again. This is actually the Haberghham Colliery plan that you can find in the records office at Preston, and that is the engine house with a reservoir at the side of it providing water for the steam engine. And if you look, this plan was actually started in 1840 when the new lease was started. And if you look, it's the copyhold lands and the freehold lands, they don't appear on the plan. I'm not going to go into the difference between copyhold and freehold on this video. All I would say is when you're really looking into history, it's difficult because you're looking at old documents talking about copyhold lands, freehold lands, who owns what, all the different legislation. It's not easy. Anyway, the point is, this is Back Lane coming across the 4 lane ends, and all the old workings are above here. So if I could ever get hold of the plan that shows these old workings, it might show where the really old workings are. Now I want you to look at this shaft here and look at this dotted line across to this. This is what's sometimes known as the Cherry Fold pits. This is what Dickinson calls the old Haberghham Colliery, and it says top bed pit. Well, the top bed in this instance is the Dandy mine, and the bottom bed is the Arley mine, because that's what the Habergham and Barclay Hills worked. Now see this dotted line? It's a tramway, and then I want you to look at that dotted line going away from it. That is also a tramway. So we're coming across from round about here to Old Coal Pit, which is the old Haberghham Colliery, and the Ginny Road or the tramway is coming across here. Now I thought, I'll tell you what, we'll have a look at a really old map. So I started looking on Hennet's from 1829. Now the problem is with some of these maps, you can't really 100% trust them. So what have we found on this? Well, I'll show you what we found. There is Haberghham Colliery on the other side of the road. There's the tramway across to Cherryfold and down to the Coalstave at Ghana. So that's a really early tramway. It's not a Ginny Road, but it's a tramway. And Hennet does show other tramways. It shows them round Padiham Way. You see, from the main Padiham Stave across to the Highton Hill pits and what have you. And he also shows them in Altham. There we go. There's one in Altham as well, and there's another one going across there. Now Hennet's, although he does show a lot of pits, he's not consistent, so we can't 100% trust everything he says, but it is interesting that he shows the Haberghham Colliery tramway going down there. So what other evidence do we have? Well, we've got the old pub here, the Jolly Colliers, which I'm taking to be there. The plane tree's still there now. It's an Indian restaurant, and we've got the Jolly Colliers there. So what are we looking at there? There we are. Is that the top of Coalclough Lane? You can tell me. I'm not the biggest. I don't know Burnley that well, but there we go. That's the Jolly Colliers. So why is it called the Jolly Colliers? It's probably not just any name. Anyway, the plan for Barclay Hills actually goes, it tells us that the lease was signed for this particular place in 1840, and we find the Barclay Hills Colliery down here by this time. So the old pit is finished that we've just looked at, and there we are. Let's see where we are on the map. There we are near the estate where the massive coke works were, and also Dickinson. Well, we all know there was a tramway later on coming up from Hapton Valley. We'll just have can we have a look at that? Here we are. Here's the Ginny up from Hapton Valley towards Barclay Hills or Haberghham, and there we actually get the shaft depth that the plans don't tell us. 170 yards down to the Arley mine, and there we have Barclay Hills Colliery there. And the tramway was opened, according to Dickinson, in 1855, and as far as I know, the pit was sunk around about 1840, showing the tramway going down past Smallshire down to the stays at Ghana. Now let's have a look on the actual plan. As I said, there was two different tramways. Let's get into the Barclay Hills Colliery there. There's Barclay Hills pit itself and the coke works. That's the upcast shaft. There's the engine pit, and there is the Ginny leaving Barclay Hills, the new Ginny, not to be confused with the one that we've just seen on the old map. And it goes right down to the canal at Ghana. And can you see both the old tramway and the new Ginny came down to Ghana States? So we've got an awful lot more to learn about the Barclay Hills, the Haberghham Colliery, Smallshire, and then its eventual way down to Ghana and down to Haberghham. So it's a fantastically historical and really interesting place. This is where the Ginny Road from Hapton Valley came up Billington Road and across what's now Rosnell Road to Barclay Hills Colliery, where there was coke ovens, and then when the pit closed it was totally just a coke works. So Barclay Hills itself is just across the road here. Just across the road, and in the trees there above there That's where the court works and Barclay Hills Colliery was. Now Barclay Hills worked the early mine and the Dandy, but the Dandy was reached more, it looks like, from the Chirrifold pits, which were further up. That's where they worked the Dandy. There was an underground drift as well, but it was in the early mine. Now Apton Valley works under here as well. In fact, my last shift was spent just further up the road under the school. But there's a distance of at least 900 feet vertically between the Apton Valley workings and the Barclay Hills workings. Probably more, because the Apton Valley was in the Union mine coming down here. This is where the North Developments were. And the North Developments go down as far as Smallshire Colliery Shaft. People think maybe Apton Valley isn't a deep pit, but when you get to the canal, Apton Valley would have been at least 1,500 feet below the canal. You wouldn't think of that because it's down in the valley, but it was. So if it had have had its opportunity to go right under the Burnley Basin, up under Lower House and then up towards Fence, it would have been really deep when you got down towards Lower House and under, well, it wasn't Padiham as such, under Haberghham Eaves there, you know. Well, let's just have a shufty across the road where Barclay Hills was. So I'm taking this to be where the court works and Barclay Hills Colliery was. You can probably tell us better if you're a Burnleyite. It's the first time I've really looked for it, but this looks like the area. So there were massive court works here and the pit itself. Barclay Hills Colliery, but also known as Haberghham Colliery, and it worked a very big area. Then there was a ginny road from here down to Smallshire, and the court works down there as well, and Ghana and the canal.